The wind moved like a ghost across the plains that morning, carrying with it the breath of heat and silence. The desert stretched endless and cruel, a sea of pale dust and cracked stone that shimmered under a merciless sun. Somewhere between nowhere and eternity walked a man named Caleb Mercer, a man who once had a name worth saying out loud. But not anymore. His boots were torn at the soles, his hat stained with years of sun and regret. He hadn't seen another soul in 6 days and hadn't spoken a word in nearly twice that. Once he had owned land near Dry River Crossing, a small ranch where cottonwoods grew along a dry creek bed. He had a wife once, too. Her name lost somewhere in the wind that took her. Fever had taken her quicker than Caleb could ride for the doctor, and the baby went with her. The ranch burned a year later, set ablaze by bandits who never even knew his name. So Caleb had walked away from everything. He stopped counting days. He stopped counting prayers. And on that 7th morning in the desert, when the world seemed nothing but sun and dust, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. A shape lay crumpled in the sand ahead, small, fragile, barely moving. As he drew closer, he saw it was a puppy. Its fur was tangled with burrs and blood, its ribs sharp as fence wire. The poor creature's breath came in tiny, rattling gasps. Caleb knelt slowly, the creak of his knees loud in the silence. He reached out a weathered hand, expecting the little thing to snap or run, but it only whimpered and tried to crawl closer. "Well now," Caleb muttered, voice hoarse from disuse. "Looks like you're worse off than me." He poured the last of his canteen into his palm and let the pup lap at the water. Most men would have turned away. The desert didn't forgive sentiment, it punished it. But Caleb didn't care much for survival anymore. The tiny spark of life before him, trembling and weak, pulled at something deep inside him, something that hadn't stirred since the day he buried his wife beneath the cottonwoods. He lifted the pup gently into his arms. It was light as air, barely breathing. He could feel its tiny heartbeat against his chest. "You hold on, little one," he whispered. "Ain't right for both of us to die today." The sun climbed higher. The desert stretched on. Caleb walked. Each step was a battle. Boots dragging, throat burning, skin blistering under the heat. The horizon rippled like fire. He knew there was an abandoned stage stop about a half-day's walk west. Maybe a well. Maybe shade. Maybe hope. Though he didn't dare call it that. The puppy whimpered once, a small broken sound that cut through the stillness. Caleb tightened his grip and kept walking. As the hours crawled by, his mind began to drift, to the years before the loneliness, before the dust had swallowed his heart. He remembered his wife Emma, smiling on their wedding day. Her hands had smelled like wild sage. She'd wanted a dog, too. A small one to keep her company while he worked the fields. He never found one in time. Now, years later, here he was holding a dying puppy in the middle of nowhere. A gift from the desert, or maybe a curse. By sundown, Caleb reached the stage stop. It was little more than a skeleton of wood and stone, abandoned long before the railroad came. He stumbled inside, found a broken water barrel, and to his surprise, a few inches of muddy water at the bottom. It wasn't clean, but it was enough. He poured a little into his hat and let the pup drink. The creature licked weakly, then rested its head on Caleb's wrist. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something close to purpose. He made a small fire from splintered wood, tore the lining from his coat to wrap the pup, and whispered words he didn't even know he remembered. Half prayer, half promise. Outside, the coyotes began their song. The desert night turned cold. Caleb sat by the fire watching the shadows move, listening to the tiny breath beside him. "Guess you and me," he said softly. "We'll see if the world's got any mercy left." And somewhere out beyond the dunes, the wind shifted, and carrying with it the faint sound of hoofbeats far off yet steady. Caleb didn't hear them at first. He was too busy watching over the little life he'd found, unaware that this small act of kindness was about to drag him into a storm of revenge, redemption, and love that would change his life forever. The desert morning rose slow and red, painting the world in fire and silence. Caleb Mercer sat by the dying embers of his campfire, hat tipped low, his back aching from a night spent on the hard boards of the old stage stop. Beside him, wrapped in a piece of his torn coat, the puppy slept, alive, but weak. He had named it Chance. The name came to him sometime in the night, whispered between dreams and memory. It felt right, like a word that still believed in miracles, even when he didn't. Chance had opened its eyes for the first time at dawn, one blue and one brown, both clouded with exhaustion but filled with something that made Caleb's chest tighten: trust. As he poured the last of his muddy water into a tin cup, he heard it again, the sound he'd half dismissed the night before. Hoofbeats, slow, cautious, approaching from the west. Caleb rose, hand instinctively brushing the worn grip of the revolver at his hip. He hadn't used the gun in months, maybe years, but in the wild, old habits never died. They just waited. The rider appeared out of the rising light. A small figure on a dappled mare, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a dust-stained coat. For a moment, Caleb thought it was another drifter, but as the rider drew closer, he saw it was a woman. She pulled the reins, stopping a few yards away, her hand hovering near the rifle strapped to her saddle. "You alone out here?" she called, her voice steady but edged with suspicion. "Looks that way," Caleb replied, his tone even, rough as gravel. "Just me and a half-dead pup." She glanced at the small bundle near the fire and softened. "Just a flicker. Most folks don't stop for things that small," she said quietly. "Most folks don't stop for much of anything anymore." A pause hung between them, stretched by wind and silence. Then she swung down from her horse, boots sinking into the dust. "Name's Josie Carter," she said. "Headed north for Dry River Crossing. Heard there's work there. Ranchers hiring hands before winter sets in." Caleb nodded. "Used to know that place. You'll find more ghosts than gold up that way." Josie shrugged. "Ghosts don't scare me. I've met worse among the living." There was something in her tone, not bravado, but a quiet, haunted truth. Caleb recognized it. He'd carried that same weight once. She crouched beside the fire, studying the pup. "Poor thing looks near gone." "Maybe," Caleb said, feeding the fire with dry brush. "But maybe not." Josie reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small flask. "Got some water left, clean." She poured a little into his cup without hesitation. Caleb blinked, almost startled by the simple kindness. "Appreciate it," he said. "Don't mention it. I ain't got much use for good manners if I can't spare a drink." As they sat there, the wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of smoke. Wood smoke, not sage or dust. Josie caught it too. "Campfire," she muttered, scanning the horizon. "But not ours." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You expecting company?" "Not the kind that lights fires this far from the road." She moved fast, grabbing her rifle and checking the chamber. Caleb rose and looked to the north ridge. Sure enough, a thin column of smoke rose against the pale sky. He felt it then. That old unease in his gut. The one that told him trouble had found him again. "How far?" Josie asked. 2 miles, maybe less," Caleb said. "Wind's carrying the smoke this way. Could be outlaws. Band called the Morrow Brothers been hitting ranches between here and Silver Creek." The name hit Caleb like a rock to the chest. He knew it. He'd heard it whispered years ago. The same men who'd burned his ranch and left him with nothing but ashes. "You sure about that name?" he asked, voice low. Josie nodded. "Heard it from a marshal in San Isidro 3 weeks back. Said they were heading east. Why?" Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched and checked the pup, still breathing, eyes flickering in restless dreams. "Because if it's them," he said slowly, "the desert's about to bleed again." Josie looked at him hard. "You got history with them?" He gave a grim smile. "More than I care to remember." For a long moment the two stood silent, the fire crackling between them. The puppy whimpered softly, and Josie reached out, brushing its fur with gentle fingers. "You planning on running?" she asked finally. Caleb shook his head. "Ran once before. Didn't change a thing." Josie's eyes met his. "Then I reckon you'll need another gun." And just like that, 2 broken souls, a man who'd lost everything and a woman with nowhere left to go, found themselves bound by fate and danger. The sun climbed higher. The air grew hotter. From the ridge came the faint echo of laughter, cruel, careless, the kind that carried the promise of violence. Josie loaded her rifle. Caleb checked his revolver. The desert, vast and empty, suddenly felt alive, waiting, watching. The desert sun was climbing, bright and merciless, as Caleb, Mercer, and Josie Carter watched the thin trail of smoke twisting up from the northern ridge. It was too steady to be from a traveler's campfire, too deliberate, too heavy. Caleb could smell it now, sharp with burned wood and oil. Somewhere out there, someone was sending a message, and in the Old West, messages written in smoke were rarely friendly. Caleb knelt by the small fire they'd built that morning, crushing it out with a boot heel. Chance stirred weakly from his blanket, eyes fluttering open. The pup was still too small to walk far, his body fragile as a whisper. Josie crouched beside Caleb, rifle in her hands, watching the horizon through narrowed eyes. "You think it's them?" she asked quietly. Caleb didn't look at her. "I don't think," he said. "I know." For a moment's silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "The Morrow brothers," Josie said, testing the name. "You said they took something from you." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They took everything." He stood, checking his revolver. It was old but well kept, 6 bullets, each one a story waiting to be told. He could almost feel the weight of his past pressing down on him, each memory clawing its way back up from the dust. Josie studied him. "You don't strike me as a man looking for revenge." He gave a grim smile. "I wasn't, not till yesterday." She said nothing. Her gaze drifted to Chance, whose tiny chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. "And the pup? What happens to him if we don't come back?" Caleb hesitated, then knelt again, running a finger along the small creature's ear. "He's tougher than he looks. Maybe tougher than both of us." Josie looked around the barren plain. "We can't take him with us, not if there's fighting." "No," Caleb said softly. "But I can't leave him behind neither." He tore a strip from his coat and tied it around a dry post inside the ruined stage stop, forming a little shade where the pup could rest. He left his hat there too, a small bit of him, a promise to return. "You hold on, Chance," he whispered. "Don't go giving up on me now." Josie mounted her horse, pulling her bandana up over her face. "There's a narrow pass about a mile east of that smoke. If we're smart, we can circle around, see what we're walking into." Caleb swung into the saddle behind her, the old leather creaking under his weight. It felt strange to ride again after so long on foot, like stepping into an old life he'd buried years ago. They rode in silence. The wind picked up, carrying with it faint sounds when worn the clang of metal, laughter, and the low, distant whinny of horses. As they neared the ridge, Josie slowed her mare. "Sounds like 3, maybe 4 men," she murmured. "Camp's tucked down near that dry creek bed." Caleb dismounted and crawled forward on his belly, the grit biting at his palms. From behind a cluster of rocks he saw them. 3 riders, rough men in dust-caked coats, their horses tethered near a wagon. Smoke rose from a small fire where a pot boiled. One of the men wore a red scarf, a sign Caleb remembered all too well. "That's them," he said under his breath. "Morrow's boys. Sam, Jake, and the big one, Clay." Josie's eyes flicked toward him. "How sure?" "Sure enough." He felt it rising inside him. That old heat, the kind that starts in the chest and burns through every vein. He'd spent years trying to bury it, but revenge has a way of finding its way back. Josie's voice broke through his thoughts. "You charge in there, you'll get yourself killed." "Wasn't planning on dying," Caleb said. "Not yet." "Then you'd better start planning something smarter." They lay there for a long moment watching the camp. Then Josie pointed to the wagon. "They've got supplies. Maybe food, water. If we can spook their horses, they'll have to chase them. Buys us time to grab what we need. Maybe even get them off the trail." Caleb nodded slowly. "And if they see us first?" Josie's expression hardened. "Then we make 'em regret it." She took aim with her rifle, adjusting the sights. Caleb slipped his revolver from its holster. The world seemed to shrink to the sound of breathing and the dry hiss of wind through stone. Josie fired first, a sharp crack that shattered the stillness. One of the horses screamed and bolted, dragging another free from its post. The camp erupted in chaos. Men cursed, scrambling for their guns. Caleb rose, taking 2 careful shots. One bullet struck the pot, sending boiling water into the air. Another clipped a man's hat clean off his head. "Over there," one of them shouted. Josie fired again, dropping another round into the dirt at their feet. "Go!" she yelled. They ran, sliding down the slope, boots kicking up sand. Behind them came the echo of gunfire, hot and wild. Caleb felt a bullet whistle past his ear, close enough to sing. They reached their horses, mounted fast, and tore across the flats. The outlaws followed, but their shots went wide. The wind howled around them, and for a few brief, mad seconds it felt like freedom. By the time they stopped miles from the ridge, the smoke behind them was fading into the sky. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest. Josie's cheek was streaked with dust and sweat, but her eyes were bright. "Alive. You all right?" she asked. "Been worse." "That was reckless," she said, but there was a hint of a smile behind her words. "Reckless," Caleb said, "is the only thing that's kept me breathing this long." They rode back to the stage stop as the sun dipped low. Caleb dismounted first, hurrying inside. Chance was still there, curled in the shade, eyes opening at the sound of his voice. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Josie knelt beside the pup. "Looks like he waited for you. Told him I'd be back." She gave him a long, searching look. "You really mean to finish this, don't you? Those men, they won't stop coming." Caleb stared out toward the fading ridge. "Neither will I." Josie looked down, fingers brushing the rifle's stock. "Then I guess we ride together." The night came quick and cold. Caleb sat by the fire, the puppy nestled against his coat, and Josie across from him, cleaning her rifle with slow, steady hands somewhere beyond the dunes. The Morrow brothers would be regrouping, angry, humiliated, and ready for blood. Caleb knew the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. And in the silence between the wind and the crackle of the fire, Chance whimpered softly, a sound so small and pure that for the first time in years, Caleb Mercer believed maybe there was still something worth saving in this godforsaken land. The wind came in hard that night, carrying grit and whispers through the broken windows of the stage stop. The boards groaned with every gust as if the ghosts of travelers long gone were restless in their sleep. Inside, Caleb Mercer sat by the low glow of the fire, his revolver resting beside him. The dying puppy curled against his leg beneath his coat. Chance was getting stronger, though not by much. His breathing was steadier now, and he had managed to lift his head twice before falling back into sleep. Caleb could feel his small heartbeat through the fabric, fragile but determined like a drumbeat refusing to quit. Across from him sat Josie Carter, cleaning her rifle in the dim light. Her eyes reflected the flame, sharp and tired all at once. She had that kind of look that comes from seeing too much too young. The same look Caleb used to see in the mirror before he stopped bothering with mirrors altogether. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence between them had a weight to it, not cold but cautious. Both knew that words, like bullets, should only be used when they mattered. Finally, Josie said, "You didn't tell me what they did." Caleb didn't answer right away. The question hung there, tangled in the smoke and the sound of the wind. She leaned forward. "The Morrow brothers. You said they took everything. I figure you meant more than your ranch." His hand tightened around the edge of his coat. "You figure right." Josie waited. Caleb sighed, the sound scraping his throat like sandpaper. "They came one night," he said quietly. 3 of them, maybe 4. I was out fixing a fence. By the time I got back, the house was burning. Emma was inside. Josie's eyes darkened. "Your wife?" "And our baby," he said. "Never even had a chance to take a first breath." The fire popped, and for a moment it sounded like gunfire. "I tried to find them," he went on, voice low and hollow. "Dug through the ashes till my hands bled. Sheriff came a day later, told me it was bandits. Morrow boys looking for whiskey and cash. Said it was bad luck that I should move on." Josie's jaw tightened. "So you did?" "Yeah," Caleb said. "But bad luck don't fade easy. It just keeps following, wearing new faces." She looked into the fire, her voice softening. "You're not the only one with ghosts." He met her eyes. "No, but you're still breathing?" She hesitated. "For now." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint sounds. Hooves on hard ground, far off but steady. Josie heard it too. She stood, rifle in hand, moving to the doorway. "We've got company." Caleb rose slowly, checking his gun. "How many?" She squinted into the dark. "Hard to tell. 3, maybe 4, coming from the ridge." Caleb felt that familiar weight settle in his chest, the one that comes when the past finally catches up. "They found us." Josie turned to him. "We can ride out through the South Pass. The moon's bright enough to see and the wind'll cover our tracks." "No," Caleb said. "We run now. We'll be running till the desert buries us." She stared at him. "You can't take them all." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can make sure they don't take you." Josie's lips parted, a protest caught between pride and disbelief. "You planning on dying tonight?" "Been planning on it for years," Caleb said. "Just never found the right reason." For a long second, neither moved. Then Josie reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small silver locket. She opened it, glancing down at the photo inside. A man and a young boy. "My husband," she said, "and my son. They were killed last winter, out near the Dakota line. Cattle thieves. Sheriff said it was the Morrow gang. I've been following rumors ever since." Caleb's breath caught. "Then we ain't just fighting for the same thing," he said. "We're fighting the same men." Josie nodded once, cold fire in her eyes. "Then let's finish it." They worked fast. Caleb doused the fire, plunging the room into shadow. Josie took position near the doorway, rifle trained on the horizon. Caleb stood by the window, revolver ready. The hoofbeats grew louder. 4 riders now, their shapes cutting through the silver light. When the first shot came, it was Josie who fired. One of the riders fell from his horse, hitting the dust hard. The others returned fire. Bullets ripping through the wooden walls, splinters flew. Chance yelped. Caleb grabbed the pup, shoving him beneath an overturned table for cover. "Stay down, boy," he muttered. He turned back to the window and fired twice. One shot hit a rider's shoulder. The man tumbled, screaming. Josie dropped another round clean through the dark. 2 down, she shouted. 2 still breathing, Caleb called back. A bullet tore past his face, grazing his cheek. The heat of it stung worse than the blood. Then came silence. Josie frowned. Where the hell? Before she could finish, the door exploded inward. The biggest of the Morrow brothers and Clay came crashing through, shotgun in hand. His face was a map of scars, his grin pure cruelty. "Well, I'll be damned," he sneered. "Look what the desert dragged back." Caleb didn't speak. His revolver was empty. Clay leveled his shotgun. Josie spun and fired, the shot grazing Clay's arm. He roared, swung the butt of his weapon, and sent her crashing into the wall. Caleb lunged, tackling him. They fell hard, fists and fury tangled in the dirt. The shotgun fired wild, blowing a hole through the ceiling. Caleb grabbed Clay's wrist, twisting until the gun fell away. Clay snarled, eyes wild. "You should have stayed dead, Mercer." "So should you," Caleb spat. He drove his fist forward once, twice, until the man went limp. Outside, the last rider fled into the dark. Josie struggled to her feet, blood on her lips, smoke still hanging in the air. "That all of them?" she asked, breathing hard. "For tonight," Caleb said. "But they'll be back." She looked at him, chest rising and falling. "Then we go after them first," Caleb nodded. "We ride at dawn." He turned toward the table where Chance lay trembling. He lifted the puppy, pressing him close. "You're safe now," he whispered. "For now." Josie watched him, eyes softening. "He's lucky you found him." Caleb shook his head. "No, I'm the lucky one." Outside, the wind calmed and the stars burned bright over the endless plains. The fire they'd started tonight would not die. Not in their hearts, not in the desert. Vengeance had a way of keeping men alive, at least long enough to find out what they were truly living for. Dawn came slow over the wasteland, a red and trembling light spilling across the sand like a wound opening to the day. The old stage stop was quiet now, smoke drifting from bullet holes and splintered boards. The smell of gunpowder lingered, sharp and bitter. Caleb Mercer stood outside, hat low against the glare, watching the horizon burn gold. Beside him, Josie Carter tightened the saddle on her mare, her movements deliberate, steady, as if ritual was the only thing keeping her from shaking. Behind them, Chance whimpered softly from his spot by the fire pit. The puppy was awake now, head lifted, one paw wrapped in a strip of Caleb's torn shirt. His eyes followed every move Caleb made. Caleb crouched and scratched behind the pup's ear. "You're coming with us this time," he said quietly. "Ain't safe here no more." Josie looked over, brow furrowed. "You sure he can handle the ride?" "He's tougher than he looks," Caleb said. "Like someone else I know." Josie gave a dry smile. "You always talk this much before a fight." "Only when I'm trying not to think about dying." She mounted her horse, adjusting her hat against the rising wind. "Then let's ride before you run out of things to say." They rode out just as the first full light of morning spilled across the desert. Caleb's horse was slower, an old roan with a limp, but steady enough to carry him and the small bundle wrapped in his coat. Chance, tucked against his chest, his tiny head poking out to watch the endless horizon. The air was cold, the kind of cold that bites through layers and finds the bones. Caleb didn't mind. The desert had a way of keeping a man honest. "The Morrow boys will be heading east," Josie said, shouting over the wind, toward the river cut. "If we move fast, we can catch them before they reach the canyon." "That's open ground," Caleb said. "We'll have no cover." "We won't need it if they don't see us coming." He glanced at her, half grinning. "You sound like someone who's done this before." "Revenge makes for a fine teacher," she said. "And I've had time to learn." They pushed the horses hard through dry ravines and over cracked mesas. Vultures circled high above, shadows sweeping across the earth like slow-moving omens. Every few miles they found signs. A broken horseshoe, a spent cartridge, the remains of a campfire still warm beneath the ashes. The Morrow brothers were close. Around midday they stopped by a shallow creek bed. Josie crouched low, tracing the dirt with her fingers. 4 horses, she said. 1 limping. That'll be Clay's big sorrel. You heard him good last night. Caleb nodded, jaw tight. Good means they're slowing. He gave Chance a small sip of water from his canteen. The pup licked his hand, tail twitching weakly. Josie watched him, her expression unreadable. You know, she said, you could turn back now. Take that little fella somewhere quiet, start over. Caleb shook his head. There's no starting over till this ends, and when it does? He looked at her, eyes weary but certain. Then I'll figure out what kind of man I've got left to be. They rode on. By late afternoon, the desert began to change, the open plains narrowing into canyons carved by wind and time. The rocks rose high on either side, blood red under the lowering sun. Caleb slowed his horse. This is where they'll make their stand, he said. Josie nodded. Then we make ours. They dismounted, tying the horses behind a rise of stone. Caleb wrapped Chance in his coat again, setting him gently inside a small hollow shaded by brush. You stay quiet, boy, he whispered. I'll come back. Chance whimpered once, a sound so small it almost broke him. Josie checked her rifle, loading a fresh round. Caleb spun the chamber on his revolver, the sound echoing in the narrow canyon. They moved carefully through the rocks, keeping low. Ahead, voices, men arguing, the words drifting on the wind. Caleb peeked over a ledge. 4 figures sat near a fire. One of them, Clay Morrow, had his arm in a sling. The others laughed and passed a whiskey bottle between them. Josie's breath came slow and steady beside him. You take left. I'll take right. Caleb nodded, eyes fixed on Clay. The memory of that burning house, of his wife's scream swallowed by fire, came back like a knife twisting in his ribs. His finger tightened on the trigger. Josie fired first. One outlaw dropped before he even knew he'd been hit. The others scrambled, shouting. Caleb rose from the rocks and took 2 quick shots. One bullet catching a man in the chest, the next clipping the whiskey bottle from Clay's hand. Mercer, Clay bellowed, spinning toward him. You son of a... His words cut short as Josie fired again, the bullet grazing his cheek. He dove for cover, shotgun blasting blind into the rocks, the canyon filled with smoke and dust. Caleb moved fast, sliding down the slope, boots grinding in gravel. A shot whined past his head. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up firing. Another man fell, his gun spinning away. Josie yelled from above. Last one's moving right. Caleb ducked behind a boulder just as Clay came around the corner, eyes wild, teeth bared. You think you can kill me and walk away clean? Clay shouted. You think the desert forgives? Caleb stepped out slow, revolver raised. I ain't asking for forgiveness. He fired once. The sound cracked the canyon open. Clay staggered, clutching his chest, and fell to his knees. He looked up at Caleb, blood on his lips. She screamed, he said, voice rasping. I remember her. The one you couldn't save. Something in Caleb broke then, a silence shattering after years of holding steady. He stepped closer, eyes like ice. And this, he said, is for her. The last shot echoed until it was swallowed by the wind. Josie climbed down slowly, her face pale but calm. It's done, she said. Caleb stood there staring at the body. No, he murmured. Not yet. He turned and walked back toward the rise where he'd left Chance. The puppy barked weakly when he saw him, a tiny, broken sound that somehow felt like life itself. Caleb scooped him up, pressing him close. Josie watched him, her eyes soft. You did what you had to. Maybe, Caleb said quietly. But I'm not sure that makes it right. The wind swept through the canyon, carrying away the smoke, the blood, the echoes of vengeance. The desert was quiet again, too quiet. Josie looked toward the horizon. There's a town a few days north, she said. Dry River crossing. Doctor, there might help the pup. Caleb nodded slowly. Then that's where we'll go. He glanced at her. You comin'? She hesitated, then swung into her saddle. For a while. Till the road splits. As they rode north, the canyon faded behind them. The sky turned gold, then purple. Caleb looked down at Chance, asleep against his chest, and for the first time in years he felt something that wasn't anger. Something small, fragile but real, hope. And though he didn't say it out loud, he knew the fight might have ended, but the story wasn't done. The desert had taken much, but maybe, just maybe, it had given him one thing back. The wind had softened by the time Caleb Mercer and Josie Carter reached the basin that cradled Dry River Crossing. The sun hung low behind them, washing the land in the weary gold of a long day's ending. Ahead lay the faint shimmer of water, Not much. Just a thin line of silver cutting through the dust. But to two souls worn thin by vengeance and heat, it looked like salvation. Caleb's horse limped with every step. He was bone-tired himself, his back aching from days in the saddle. But he kept one arm steady around the small bundle tucked against his chest. Chance slept there, wrapped in his coat. The pup's breathing had steadied. His fur cleaner now, though he was still far too thin. Every few minutes, Caleb would glance down just to make sure the little body still moved. Josie rode beside him in silence. Her hat shadowed her face, but Caleb could see the change in her. Something quieter than the restless rage that had driven her across half the territory. Revenge, once burning bright and wild, had burned itself down to ash. They reached the riverbank at dusk. The town of Dry River Crossing sprawled nearby. A scatter of weathered buildings, a saloon, a few lights flickering in windows. Not much more than a promise of civilization in a land that didn't forgive weakness. Josie dismounted first. You should take him to the doc's place, she said, nodding toward the far end of town. Second building past the smithy. Man's name is Warren. He's got a soft spot for strays. Caleb smiled faintly. That makes two of us. He carried Chance to the river's edge first, kneeling to let the pup drink. The water was cool and clean, and the sight of the small creature lapping at it stirred something deep in Caleb's chest. A feeling he'd forgotten how to name. Maybe peace. Maybe grace. Josie crouched beside him, her reflection trembling in the water. Never thought I'd see the desert give anything back, she said quietly. Sometimes, Caleb said, it waits till you've got nothing left to give before it starts returning favors. She looked at him for a long moment. You could stay here, you know. Work a ranch, raise that pup. This place. It's far enough from the ghosts. Caleb shook his head slowly. I don't think ghosts care much about distance. Maybe not, she said, but living folk do. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted Chance into his arms and walked toward the doctor's cabin. The door opened before he could knock. A tall, gray-bearded man in a vest and spectacles. You look like you've come a long way, the man said. We have, Caleb replied. This little one needs help. The doctor's eyes softened when he saw the pup. Come in. Josie waited outside, leaning against the hitching post, watching as the light inside flickered over Caleb's face. Time passed, maybe minutes, maybe longer. When he finally stepped out again, his shoulders were looser, his eyes tired but clear. He'll live, Caleb said. Doc cleaned him up, said he just needs rest. Josie smiled, small and real. Good. I was starting to think that little thing might outlast both of us. Caleb chuckled, a sound that felt strange. Rusty, like something half-remembered. They walked toward the river again, where the sky had turned the color of faded whiskey. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the kind that hurt. Finally, Josie said, You ever think about what comes after? After? After the dust settles. After the killing's done. Caleb looked out over the water. Once I thought there wasn't anything after now. Maybe there's a road somewhere that don't end in blood. She studied him. You could ride it if you wanted. He met her gaze. And you? Josie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I ain't built for quiet places, not yet. But maybe someday. A soft bark interrupted them. Chance had woken, stumbling out of the doctor's doorway, tail wagging weakly. He trotted toward Caleb, ears too big for his head, eyes bright with that stubborn spark that had kept him alive through the desert's cruelty. Caleb knelt, scooping him up. Look at you, he said softly. You made it. Josie reached out, stroking the pup's fur. He's got more fight in him than most men I've met. He's got more reason to live, too. For a while, they just sat there. A man, a woman, and a puppy beside a river that barely remembered how to flow. Behind them, the lights of Dry River Crossing flickered like distant stars. Josie stood first, brushing dust from her coat. I'll be riding out at sunrise, she said. North, maybe Montana, someplace the past don't know my name. Caleb nodded. You'll find it. And you? Reckon I'll stay a while. Build something small. Something worth keeping. She smiled. You always were stubborn. Takes one to know one. They shook hands, rough, calloused, wordless. Then she swung into her saddle, pausing only once to look back. Take care of that little fella, she said. He's got your eyes. And with that, she rode off into the night, her silhouette swallowed by the horizon. Caleb watched until she vanished. Then he turned back toward the river. Chance nestled in his arms. The water glimmered beneath the starlight, soft and endless. Caleb let the quiet wash over him. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't feel like a man waiting to die. He was just a man, tired and alive, with a heartbeat beside his own and the whisper of a second chance in the wind. The desert had taken everything from him once: his land, his family, his hope. But out here, beneath a sky full of mercy and fire, it had given him something back. Not forgiveness, not fortune, just life, and that was enough.